Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Donna Fiesel, and I'm your host of Donna's Edge television and radio talk show where truth matters. Thank you so much for watching every day, Monday through Friday, beginning at 2 p.m. That's on the Eastern time zone as I get to ride home with you in the afternoon. It's always so much fun. I love the letters and the emails I get from you guys. Continue sending those. They absolutely make my day. Donna at donnasedge.com. Donna at donnasedge.com. Now, you can find us on television. We are syndicated on Abundant Television, found on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Don't forget the podcast on the newscasters.com. And we are with the biggest South Carolina radio station, country station, right here in South Carolina. A lot of fun to be with them, WZLA, and I really love the owners of the station. They're remarkable. They are conservatives, and you're going to hear it on their morning show every morning, too. It begins at 6 a.m. So go ahead and get started with them. But again, thank you so much for being with us. I have attorney Don Brown with me. He is candidate for U.S. Senate, and he's in North Carolina. My heart is still there. It really is. But I'm glad to be in the Carolinas. Good place.
That song, In My Mind, I'm Going to Carolina, doesn't say which Carolina. And so it's all Carolina, if you ask me, on both sides of the border. So
I think so, too. It's a good place to be. Yeah, you're really shaking grounds up in North Carolina. I mean, I'm following you. You are doing a great job, and folks are really out there listening to you.
Well, we believe we're getting our message out. You know, we want to continue to try to get it out. And so we hope it's a common sense message. God, family, country, freedom, the U.S. Constitution, the Holy Bible. Take those principles and stick with them, and you're in good shape, I think. So that's what we try to do, and hopefully everything flows from all that.
Well, we had I've had an email where you were kind of compared to John Kennedy in Louisiana without the thick accent. And you got the common sense stuff, too.
I'd love to see that email. That's a very, very high compliment.
Send it too.
He's a brilliant guy for sure, and certainly the most entertaining member of the United States Senate, and a unique personality like we've not seen in the Senate in an awful long time. So thanks for that. Shoot me the email. I like to see that. Get a kick out of it.
I'd love to hear that. I knew it because this guy brings common sense, and so do you. But I wanted to ask you a very common sense question. I'm hearing all over, liberal news media, even local news in this area about how terrible the economy is. It's just horrible. I'm not saying, am I living on another planet? I'm not seeing a terrible economy.
First of all, the main problem, the economy has gotten better since Trump has come into office, for sure. And the thing that's driven that is the drop in gasoline prices, first and foremost. And that's because of deregulation. Now, are there areas of the economy that are still too expensive? Yes. And the biggest one is healthcare. And that goes to the Democrats' Obamacare. And if we can bust that up, we can help people with their pocketbooks. So the economy could be better, but it's certainly better than it was under the Democrats. And we got to continue finishing the job that we started in order to get it where we want it. But it isn't like we're talking about hyperinflation. Under Biden, we were looking at hyperinflation, remember? You were looking at gas prices soaring through the roof so bad you couldn't even go to the grocery store. You were looking at eggs were like $8. What did they get? $7 a dozen or something like that?
Ridiculous. More than that in some areas. More than that.
Yeah. So the economy is bad narrative is driven to a certain degree by the media that wants to create that issue and that impression for the midterms. And yes, we got to do some things so that younger people can get into houses and this type of thing. We're on the right path. But the notion that, we have a Democrat-like economy that's about to fall off the cliff at any minute doesn't comport with reality.
I'm talking to young folks in the area, young marrieds, young out of college, those kind of folks. And they seem to be, it's almost, they're going a different way, because when we grew up, when I graduated from high school and then, heading on to higher education, my goal was someone to own my own house. There was no question about it. Dad said, no rent. If you rent, you're just throwing your money away. That was the attitude back then. So you're going to buy your house. So I'm going to, teach you things to do, to save money and quit wasting it on clothes and makeup and stuff like that. And buy your own house, buy your own car. But kids now are talking about renting more than ever. And they seem to be sold on that idea. How did that happen? where instead of buying a car, you lease one?
The thing is that there are two concepts here. There is the economy in general, where we talk about cost of living, inflation, how the job market is, et cetera. And then there's what we call economic opportunity. Mm-hmm. And part of the issue with some of these kids is that getting into a house is a big deal. You got to save your money. In other words, when you think about it, your dad taught you to buy and not rent. He also taught you how to save, though, didn't he? Yes. Of course he did. And so you don't hear the part about I got to save for the down payment. And part of the issue is we haven't been. You and I have talked about this before, but when we're talking about changes to our educational structure all the way around, whether it's public, private, Christian, homeschool, whatever, teaching basics. When we say economics, we're talking about basic budgeting, and common sense budgeting is some things we got to get back to. And so you find some kids that are in a predicament because they haven't saved. In other cases, it's because they're in areas where the Democrats have driven the price of houses up out through the roof. One thing that I like to see, remember I said you've got the issue of the economy and economic opportunity. I think we can improve economic opportunity in a lot of ways by the elimination of property taxes. Yeah. And certainly that is largely a state, not a federal question. But if you eliminate property taxes either all around or even for first-time home buyers or whatever, you might see. My belief is the only good tax is a repeal tax. So I think there's some things we can do from a broader perspective to improve and make the economic opportunity situation more attractive. But still, a lot of kids got to be trained, and we need to get into schools and teach basic budgeting too, teach basic training too, and do things to encourage savings. Because really, it makes more sense, like your daddy said, to buy and own rather than rent and throw the money away.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. The only thing I'm hearing that would be halfway a good thing about renting is you're not responsible for roofs, so you're not responsible for maintenance. But still, I mean, after 10 years, whatever, if you do what you need to do, you'll have your own home. But let me ask you a question. What can be done to resolve this issue? You were talking about property taxes. Okay, so I own my own home. Why am I paying taxes? It's paid for. Why do I still have
you shouldn't have to pay property taxes. You see, it's the government wanting to keep its fingers into everything. You can't have, it's like, I've said this, you've heard me say this before, but the founders believe that the power of the government and the freedom of the individual are inversely proportional. Every tax, every regulation, every rule, no matter what it is, to one extent or the other, is an impingement upon freedom. Now, some laws you need. We need laws against murder and burglary and arson and the criminal code. We need those. The laws that basically track the moral code are perfectly fine. But when you get to the point that government is setting up, scenarios so it can keep its fingers into private property and ultimately own it. In other words, you own your farm, you own your home, but if you don't pay the property tax, the government comes to take it. So who really owns it? That's the fundamental question. Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting because in some places like Texas, which Texas has no income tax, but their property taxes, our friends there that pay more in property taxes than most people would in a mortgage. It's so bad. And I think that fundamentally we got to figure out a way to get away from property taxes, just like we got to get away from income taxes. You went to a fair tax and let that take care of everything and supplement it with tariffs, and you're good to go.
I'm ready for fair tax. There's nothing about it that I don't like. It's freedom for Americans. They have something called the prebate, and only if you are an American citizen would you get the prebate. And I think that's a great thing. For American citizens, we worked hard and nothing given to us. And it's just a fair thing all the way around. Folks who visit, folks who come on vacation to the United States are paying taxes. So, I mean, that's just the way to go. And there's a guy named Chuck Bailey. I think you probably talked with him. He is with Alabama Fair Tax. And he always says this. The first time he said it, I almost cracked up, dying laughing. He said, you know what? Even drug dealers and prostitutes would be paying taxes at this point. Because basically, if you do something like that, everything's under the table. So you're not paying taxes.
Right. That's right. And of course, we have illegals in the country that are paying zero income tax. You think about it, Donna, here in Charlotte, the Border Patrol came in. Have we been on air? We've been on air once since then, haven't we? Have we been on here since the Border Patrol was in Charlotte?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yes.
we have. Well, as you know, there's 30,000 students missing school in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system the week the Border Patrol was here. What's that tell you? That tells you, that you have 30,000 kids of illegals in the school system. And that's a strain on the public taxpayer. And those folks that are here, not legally, are taking advantage of Americans' taxpayers to give them a free ride. If you had a fair tax, the fair tax would force even the illegals to participate in the taxing system. And because anybody that goes in is going to pay that fair tax that's going to be distributed, and it certainly would make it fair is an understatement, to be honest with you. Because one thing that is not fair is for 60% aren't even filing returns right now. And so there's an onerous burden on a very small number of Americans, and it's about as unfair as you can get. Its current system is.
Yeah, and that system's not going to hold up that way. Common sense will tell you if you have less people paying in and more going out, it's just not gonna work.
Right.
It's a big bubble. It's going to burst someday.
That's right.
So, okay, let's talk tech jobs, because I'm buddying up now with the Piedmont Technical Schools, and I'm just going to tell you, they let me go on tour. It was supposed to be a 1-hour tour, turned into an 1.5-hour tour because I love it. We're walking around some of the study rooms, and so I think I really made a hit with those guys out there. We walked into one room, and I said, "Wow, look at the drill presses." And the administrator said, "You know what a drill press is?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? I'm, from the South. My dad was a tech guy."
Surprising, didn't you?
So I know what one. I've got one, by the way. So, but anyway, these are great jobs that are coming out there, and they're also welcoming AI. And there are so many jobs that are going to happen out of that. And I said, "Well, what is the one thing you're really hearing about that? What's the negative responses you're getting?" He said, "Well, that it will do away with jobs." I said, "I'm older than you. You could be my son." I said, "I remember when laptops came out. I remember when cell phones came out." And it was like, "Well, the computers are going to take over the world." Well, guess what? People like me tear up cell phones. People like me drop laptops. You got to have somebody to repair them. And if you've got robotics, well, then you're going to have somebody who actually runs that. Somebody sitting behind a keyboard running this robot. And so they welcomed me to the team, by the way. So they're going to be on the show a lot. But tech jobs, I mean, you don't have this terrible, college debt behind you, and you can just go on ahead and start working and making a living and buying your house. I mean, they pay so well. So why is there such a backlash from some people about tech jobs?
Well, there's still institutional resistance to where we need to go in education. And tech education is one of the places we need to go. And even beyond that, basic skills, we're talking about in the trades, the trade education, like plumbing and electricity and welding and things of this nature are also just as important. And it's there. We're fighting an institutional resistance that the educational establishment wants you to think you got to do, classic liberal arts and there again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, except it isn't the only way. It's one way, and in order to serve needs of society in the 21st century, tech education has got to be at the forefront, along with the basic skills and trades have got to be at the forefront as much as anything else. I mean, history's got to be there too. We've got to study history. We got to study philosophy. We got to study those things as well to be well-rounded and understand history. But mathematics, we've got to reorient our educational thinking. Even in California, when I was out there in the Navy, 100 years ago, one thing that a lot of especially the Christian families out there that were doing that made sense, even though it was not as liberal as it is now. There was a Republican governor named Pete Wilson, but the point is the model in California 25 years ago was you graduate from high school, then you go to technical school or community college before you go to college. So you're saving a lot of money, you're staying at home, and makes all the sense in the world. But in the South, that's not been the way we think. Or east of Mississippi, we think, I'm going to go to Bama, I'm going to go to Ole Miss, or I'm going to go to Duke, or I'm going to go to Wake, or I'm going to go to Carolina, and again, nothing wrong with all that, but economically it makes sense to do a 2-year out in some other type of trade profession or community college because the money is saved. So we've got to, we have to work on the way we are thinking educationally from education standpoint. And we're fighting the NEA. We're fighting, lots of left-wing and Democrat so-called education think tanks, which are really just indoctrination think tanks, if you ask me. But that's a long answer to a very short and a very good question.
Well, I'll tell you what, if I could make the decision, this is just plain old cornbread language, but what if we just get back to reading, writing, and arithmetic and really focus on that, because those are the core points to growing and learning. You've got to know these things and stop it with all this nonsense about why is 1 + 1 4? I mean, they come up with all these really weird things, and I understand kids have to think, but they're thinking the wrong way. 1 + 1 is 2, not 4. And it's just a bunch of nonsense, but just let them grow and learn. And another thing, I worked for GTE for a long time. I worked corporate with them. And I'm just telling you, if you will ask your company, if you want to go back to school again, folks want higher educated employees. They just want that. But think on your own. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask. Just walk up to the boss and just ask. If I go ahead and go to a school of higher learning and I decide I want to get my doctorate degree, would you reimburse me for that? What are they going to say? No. Most of the time they'll say, yeah, if you keep up a particular grade point average and, you promise to stay with them a good couple of years, right, they'll do that for you. They'll do a reimbursement, but people don't teach that.
Right. Well, that's the type of independent critical thinking that needs to be taught, not defend why 1 + 1 is 4. I mean, give me a break.
I'm sorry. That's just about the total.
We got to write a book together, Donna, the new Common Sense. Common Sense Part 2. Thomas Paine had Part 1. We can do Part 2. So there you go.
There you go. I think you need to bring that out on the road with you. Well, we are growing this show, and we have a lot of new sponsors, which means we have to take 2 breaks now. So let's go into a commercial break, and we'll be right back in just a few minutes. Everybody hang in there.
Twin City Used Car Sales has been serving drivers in the Northeast Alabama area for years with a quality selection of late model used cars, SUVs, and pickup trucks. On top of our extensive selection and competitive prices, we offer professional auto financing services for used car buyers of all credit levels. Whether you've just begun your search or you're ready to secure your next vehicle, at Twin City Used Car Sales, you will drive away with the vehicle of your dreams. The sales and finance staff at Twin City Used Car Sales looks forward to serving you, and you can apply for financing online before your visit to our used dealership in Gadsden, Alabama. Check us out on the web at twincityusedcars.com or go by our location at 901 First Avenue, Gadsden, Alabama. We sincerely look forward to serving you.
Good afternoon. We are back. My name is Donna, and I am your host of Donna's Edge television talk show. I've been doing this for 20 years, and so glad that Don Brown has been part of it for quite a few years. And Don and I are good friends, and I'm so glad to hear when you were running for U.S. Senate. It's just a great thing. I wanted to mention a couple of sponsors. Eggs Up Grill. Do you guys have an Eggs Up Grill there in Charlotte or anywhere?
I don't know, but it sounds good to me. I'm ready. I love eggs in the morning, so let's do it. Eggs Up Grill.
It's a good place. I'm telling you, they only serve breakfast and lunch. You can have breakfast for lunch if you would like to do that. So they are giving away a $25 gift card every single Friday. So we're glad to add them to the team. And Honey Baked Ham is a good establishment. We love the Honey Baked Ham. You can drop in and get sandwiches. And if you're just really not into ham, they also have a great roast chicken and roast turkey. So you need to check that out as well. I also wanted to mention the Anderson Mall. Quite a few merchants are coming in with us as well. So we've got a busy time ahead of us with a lot of commercials coming in. But again, thank you so much to all of our sponsors and all the Alabama sponsors who stayed with us. Twin City Used Cars with Bobby Ledbetter. Thank you again, guys, for making all of that happen. We get to go to Alabama once a month. It's always the third Monday of the month. I always have a great time, so it's always good to see all those folks down there. Don Brown is with us. He's an attorney, he's an author, and he's a speaker. Let's talk about your books.
Well, thank you, Donna. We had, of course, our most recent release is Kangaroo Court, and we're talking about that book quite a bit on the campaign trail because it's a look at the Democrats' practice of political prosecutions over really the last 30 years. And in that book, we look at not just the Trump prosecutions that the Democrats brought that have now all unraveled, which we predicted would happen in the book, by the way. We look at isolated cases of other politicians they've gone after. For example, Rick Perry, the governor of Texas, was prosecuted by the Democrats for vetoing a bill. When the Texas Constitution allowed them to do that, the Democrats wanted to prosecute for vetoing a bill, political prosecution. They prosecuted Bob McDonnell, the governor of Virginia, around 2014 for accepting a gift. Prosecuted governor's wife for accepting a gift, even though Virginia law allowed the governor to accept gifts as long as the governor, declared it and it was under a certain amount. Most of these gifts, people bring gifts to the governor or gifts to a president, and then the governor or president puts them in a museum or whatever. But Jack Smith prosecuted Bob McDonnell for extortion, even though the governor complied with Virginia law, got him convicted in Northern Virginia. The Supreme Court reversed that unanimously. Mm-hmm. And then there are regular Americans that the book talks about, like the McCloskeys, Patricia and Mark McCloskey. Those were the couple in St. Louis that were holding the gun. Remember that? When the mob came through and this Soros prosecutor, Kimberly Gardner, went after him. So Kangaroo Court looks at that. And it's the book has been interesting because a lot of the things we're now seeing, we're still continuing to see a lot of that. And now it isn't as much the political prosecutions as much as it is these political judges that are out of control since Trump has come back into office, like this Boasberg guy that tried to turn the plane around full of illegals, and Trump ignored that one, thank goodness. But we have judicial tyranny and political prosecution, and so Kangaroo Court touches on all those, and that's the newest one out. And so when this campaign's over, I'm hoping I really want to do a series on the U.S. Navy in World War II, or maybe a historical fiction thing, and that's kind of like my dream project. But we have 16 books out, and I'm always happy to correspond with readers and love history and love politics and love the Constitution. So hopefully the books will reflect all that.
Absolutely, and they do. Let's talk about your prominent endorsements. You had a lot of them. Talk about them.
Yeah, we have. And matter of fact, we have in our Senate campaign, we were most recently endorsed by Colonel Allen West, which was a real big boost. Colonel West and I had met before, and our paths had crossed several times on the Lawrence case and the extortion 17 case, and he was kind enough to get on board. Sidney Powell, of course, had endorsed us earlier, and Sidney just shot a little 40-second video for us. She was we had a fundraiser in Union County Friday night, and Sidney surprised us with a nice little video, and we're going to go up with that. I'll send you that. It'll be online this week. Of course, General Mike Flynn endorsed and then re-endorsed. He endorsed us at the end of June when Tillis was still in the race. Tillis dropped out. Watley jumped in, and God bless General Flynn on Veterans Day. He re-endorsed and issued a video, which I appreciated very much. And so we got that, and General Jerry Boykin is a huge endorsement. And General Boykin is a North Carolinian. He's a former Delta Force commander, a former Special Forces commander, and a good friend. And so I'm proud of those endorsements and many others. The Veterans Party of North Carolina is endorsed. Act Right USA is endorsed. The Cowboy Logic Show on RAV, Donna Fiducia and her husband Don Newen, they've endorsed. They've been great supporters. Ann Vandersteel, who I interviewed with yesterday, is a great lady, has endorsed. So we're really blessed by a number of patriots who've gotten on with the campaign. I wouldn't trade these endorsements for anything.
Oh, no. You got some great ones. And I wanted to also thank you. I can't thank you enough for your service. Thank you so much for what you've done. What do you plan to do to help veterans? Sometimes they're left out of the loop.
It's interesting. I was speaking to the North Carolina Federation of Republican Women about a month ago in Greensboro, and I'm looking for the video of that. And they invited me to come. The keynote that day was Jennifer Griffin, who you may have seen her. She's has been a Fox News correspondent and a CBS correspondent. The government's gone after her, but she's done so much, in her exposés to expose veterans issues. And I made the comment, and I asked that day, I said, how many spouses of vets do we have? And the spouses stood up and I said, listen, you, ladies and gentlemen, deserve all the same thanks that the veterans who are on active duty deserve. And one of the things I want to see happen, this is kind of a icing on the cake thing, but I want to see a national recognition day for military spouses. You know, I don't think we need to take any shut up government buildings, post offices down. We got enough that going on already, but we need to have a national day recognition. But one of the comments I made, and I mean this, is I believe that the lowest ranking private in the Army or seaman in the Navy or airman in the Air Force, to me, is more important to this country than the highest ranking member of the Congress. We had an Army and a Navy and a Marine Corps before there was even the Declaration of Independence, and we owe our freedom, to the sacrifice that those patriots in the Continental Army and Navy made for us. And I made the comment, I think it's absolutely a disgrace that members of the Congress have superior health care to veterans. And that's got to change. The VA system has become a bureaucratic monstrosity. And, we have a lot of veterans running around now from the Iraq and Afghanistan war with having suffered from traumatic brain injury. Because what happened in those wars, taking the Afghan war, the Taliban could not fight us in a firefight. So what they would do, in other words, you're not going to take on even the regular Army, the Marine Corps, the Taliban's not going to take any of those folks on. So what they would do, they'd come out at night and put bombs in the ground. And our guys would step on bombs and IEDs and roll over them, and they get these, traumatic brain injury. And they can't get help for that because the VA system is ineffective. I'd like to see the VA really scale way back and just give veterans a medical card, let them go where they need to go. At this point, Donna, we're operating with an all-volunteer force. It isn't like it was 50, 60 years ago when folks were drafted. So that means that the premium that we put on the dependents we have on the armed forces is higher than ever. So I like to see, I want to work really, really hard to see what we can do about veterans health care. And I'm going to be a champion for vets. I am a vet, but I'm not a war hero. I'm just a vet. But I can tell you one thing, I'll go to war for my fellow vets every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And that's going to have to start with getting better health care opportunities so they're not closed out by the VA system and can get help that they need.
Absolutely. Phil's dad was in the World War II. And I'll tell you, it was a nightmare for him to go to the VA hospital for anything. I mean, he would be there for hours. It was just ridiculous.
Well, Donna, the
quick.
The VA system is typical of what happens when government gets in the way.
Right.
Like President Reagan famously said, government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem. And, I taught Ann Vandersteel. Ann Vandersteel came here and spent 10 weeks in Western North Carolina documenting FEMA's failures. And what happened in Western North Carolina and what's happened in Eastern North Carolina with these storms is you have these bureaucracies get formed. Whether it's FEMA or Roy Cooper, who I'm going to take out in the Senate race next year, came up with this rebuild North Carolina, blah, blah, blah. And it sounds good on the face, but then these organizations get all this money, but they put up 100,000 roadblocks to you getting the help if you need it. And it's absolutely a criminal enterprise. And it's very similar in the VA system. You have this VA system that's built up that's supposed to help veterans. That's a great idea. But the roadblocks are so onerous that it becomes ineffective. We got to cut through those roadblocks with the VA and in all areas. FEMA's got to go in a trash can, but that is governmental thinking. They want to have control. With FEMA, we heard many reports. Franklin Graham was on the ground. The Cajun Navy was on the ground. Adam Smith, who's running for Congress, his group was on the ground. We have private groups on the ground helping people before the idiot feds show up. The idiot feds show up. FEMA shows up. And Donna, we have multiple reports of them going into churches where just have been taking in mattresses and food and first aid supplies. And FEMA says, give it to us. We'll determine where it goes. Most of our people say, get the heck out of Dodge. Who do you think you are? Anyway, I didn't mean to get sidetracked there.
I got tickled at the Cowboy Church, and
Right, yeah.
so I do a lot of things with them.
Right.
Philip Gillen, who's with American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches, he heads up a lot of programs. And so he called me. He was so mad. We're just buddies, and so he was mad. So what are you so mad about? And he said, well, I'm up there. I'm trying to distribute food and water and all this kind of stuff. But he met a really good sheriff. And this guy was in Tennessee. They were trying to get across the line to get some supplies to, the folks who suffered this horrible hurricane in Asheville, North Carolina. Couldn't get through. And so I don't know what the guy did, but anyway, they were able to get through without FEMA confiscating every single thing they had.
And we have some very good sheriffs in North Carolina. Sometimes your local sheriff make all the difference in the world. It's the only constitutionally authorized law enforcement position. Sheriffs are the highest law enforcement position in a county. And if you get one that believes in the Constitution and God and freedom first, it's a very blessed thing. We don't have that here in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, unfortunately. But over in my new home county of Union County, we do, with Sheriff Eddie Cathy over there. And we have some great sheriffs in the state of North and South Carolina. And I'm glad to hear that the guy over in Spartanburg was able to lend a hand.
Absolutely, he was. I wanted to ask you about national security, because we're in a world of who in the world knows what is. We don't know what happened. I really don't even want to know at this point. Who's aiming at us right now? What can be done about national security and more help to the folks who are in office? I mean, how can this be helped? We don't know what's happening.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, national security, when you're talking about, we have to understand, first off, you have to step back from a broader perspective and understand that there are forces that want to take out our American way of life, and they want to take us out as Americans, and then national security is something that the left will use as an excuse to try to take constitutional rights down as well. Take, for example, the spying that is going on right now under the Section 702 of the National Defense Authorization Act, whereby the government can tap into your conversation. You talk to somebody overseas. They're saying that is for security, but they're also violating your rights under the Fourth Amendment. So it's a very, very delicate balance to be conscious of. I guess that's what you're asking, in terms of national security. I think that most of the three-letter agencies that are supposed to be responsible for intelligence need to be whisked away. We've got like 17 national security agencies with the deep state, Office of Naval Intelligence, Office of Army Intelligence, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And these apparatus, they compete against each other, and they create a real threat to the Constitution. So I think you got to make sure the Constitution is protected, but then we got to stay protected as we can as well. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking me, but those are my thoughts.
That was it. Let's talk about cybersecurity. And it's just plain ridiculous. I'm beginning to get all kinds of crazy emails and texts now. So it's text all the time. They'll say, hey, they won't mention my name, but I'll get this text. It'll be, you want to meet for coffee? It'll be something stupid like that. I don't even respond to them. But it's crazy. And then it's like laws are not out there to protect the everyday American. I'm talking about, it's easy to do a copy and a paste, and I can look as if I am an administrator with Bank of America. But people won't take time to notice email addresses that come to you. It could be Susie@gmail.com, but they're pretending to be from, say, Capital One or whatever. Can't something be done about that? I mean, the phones are really out there.
Well, you got to identify the originator, and part of the challenge you've got is a lot of that stuff's coming from overseas. Yeah. And if you can catch them here in the United States, you can whack them if you can identify who they are. Now, on a small scale, for example, people say, Donna, I got another Facebook request from you, and of course I'm already friends with them. I never send them a request, but what they want to do is they want the intruder uses my picture and my profile or whatever, and sends somebody a Facebook request, and they want that person to accept so that they can then get in to personal information, who the people's contacts are, where they live, buying patterns. It's a very, very dangerous situation. In fact, it is this type of vulnerability that has allowed the rise in a lot of the interstate sex trafficking that we're dealing with even now. And these imposters go on and lure people in, and there needs to be for the ones that can be tracked down that are engaged in blatant fraud. See, it's a fraud. It is an act of fraud because you're trying to either defraud someone or steal from them or hurt them physically. That's what's happening. And so I think they're going to have to beef up the punitive measures for the folks that we can track down domestically. I don't have a solution for what you're going to do when they're in the Philippines or Indonesia. If you can track them down, you can put pressures. I say the Philippines or Indonesia. I mean that. I'm not just picking on those countries. What I mean, these countries all over the world where these people get together and start sending bots here. If we can identify where those are coming from, we can put pressure on those countries. But it's a problem. The solution is not there for the problem, unfortunately, because
sometimes I just play around with these idiots. I had one day, Phil and I were going to Lowe's and I'd pick up a few things. And so this phone call comes in. And so I had to take every phone call because I never know when it's a sponsor or whatever. And it could be anybody from anywhere. So I take them all. So this one clown calls and said he's with Publishers Clearinghouse and that I've won $1 million. I said, oh, really? And I told him, let's sit here in the parking lot for a minute. I want to talk to this one. Okay. And I said, okay, so I won $1 million, but I was supposed to send him money so he could release the $1 million back. And of course, my response was, we'll take that amount out and send me what's left over. You can do it that way. And then I said, do I hear roosters? I could hear a rooster in the background. And I said, do I hear roosters in the background? What is this? Where are you at? And the guy said, oh, that's our mascot. And I said, oh, Publishers Clearinghouse now has a mascot. And it's a rooster. So, some of it's just common sense stuff. We just have to open our, don't hope it really is $1 million, but just, listen to their little signs.
Donna, you won't believe this. Maybe you will believe it because you and I believe anything these days. I guess it was 20 years ago. I had a doctor come into my office and said, I just lost $40,000. I said, what do you mean? And that this doctor, this MD, had fallen for that very type of thing. Send us your credit card, send us this, and we'll give you that. And they drained him for like $40,000 someplace in Africa. I'm saying, dude, man, you're losing an MD. And it goes back. This is very similar to the question you asked about cybersecurity and all this online fraud. When it originates outside of the country, even when it originates in the country, it's difficult to track. But when it originates outside of the country, you may as well kiss it goodbye. You're sending money to Ethiopia or somewhere, you'll never get it back. So, but I always remember that an MD came in my office who had been dumb enough to fall for that. And I guess that goes to the old saying, you might have a lot of book sense, but maybe you don't have a lot of common sense. So
Phil and I are caretakers for my mother. And so she got herself into trouble. And, a lot of times, they'll prey on these lonely women and all this kind of stuff. And mother gave away a lot of money. She really did. So I went to the sheriff's department and I'm expecting something to be able to be done about it. And they said, no, she didn't get robbed. She was not held at gunpoint. She gave it away. There's not a thing you can do about it. And
yeah, that's frustrating. It is frustrating because, but sometimes elderly people get preyed on like that. Mm-hmm. And they get preyed on because for a lot of reasons. But you have to show that they were truly incompetent or had lost all their free will before really you can reverse anything like that. And that's easier said than done. We have these undue influence cases involving wills where the only person changes the will at the last minute from a caretaker that's come in. And those are hard cases to, the kids will then come in and try to sue the caretaker. And you got to show that it was so overwhelming that the elderly person really had no choice. And it's hard to do. So it's a sad situation. We got to watch out for elderly folks because they are targets for sure. And you see these widowers in their 80s, and next thing you know, they've got a 40-year-old, sends them a request on Mass.com or whatever. You just got,
Come on.
well, it's kind of like a football coach at UNC. The football coach is Belichick. Belichick, right? Belichick, who was with the Patriots and won all the Super Bowls, and now he's at UNC, and he's 72, and his girlfriend's 24.
Come on.
Yeah.
If this guy were working at a service station, she wouldn't give him a second glance. I'm just. No way.
72 and 24.
Before I get myself in trouble, let's go into a commercial break.
Right.
We'll be right back in just a minute.
Are you ready?
We all wonder what tomorrow will bring, but the future lays itself at the feet of the prepared and surrenders to the will of the persistent. It's not easy, but today shapes you so you can shape tomorrow. With Northeast Alabama Community College, when the future asks if you're ready, you can answer.
Yes.
Begin your future at Northeast Alabama Community
Okay,
College.
we are back. My name is Donna, and I'm your host of Donna's Edge Television and Radio Talk Show, where truth matters. That's why we have Don Brown with us on the show. It's if it's the truth, Don just speaks it. What are you hearing? I'm seeing this huge trend right now. So I'm not the only one who loves living out in the country with my chickens. Okay, so I'm seeing a huge trend. People are trying to get away from the big cities, especially if they're liberal cities, and they're moving out, into more rural type areas. But I'd like to see help for a lot of the farmers. The farmers, people who've owned their farms, it's went through generation of farm-owned land. They need help. I'm just telling you.
Well, Donna, and I am running on a plank of we've got to protect family farms. Mm-hmm. We got to protect them against big conglomerates or drive them out of business. We have to understand that food security is national security, and we can't be. I may have mentioned to you there's a battle going on in the 19 coastal counties of North Carolina over the shrimping industry. There've been shrimpers there working there for generations, and some rhinos have tried to, and Democrats too, try to shut that business down. But that's a matter of national security. We've been able to beat that back for the time being. But a few months back, there was a report of tons of radioactive shrimp coming in from Indonesia. And with family farms, my granddaddy was a tobacco farmer. We had a small farm. I worked on farms. We've got to the point, though, that these large agricultural conglomerates, and some that are not even American, are basically driving family farmers out. So we got to have policies to protect our farms and to incentivize farming again. And one way you do that is you eliminate property taxes on farms that are used for agricultural purposes. That's one thing you can do. And I think we've got to bust up some of these large chemical groups, Monsanto and others. I think that I'm a big believer in antitrust. I've said this before, but I don't think you can have, multinational farming operations, dominate the market. Smaller is better, and more and small is better. So this is an extreme concern, and we got to find a way to make it attractive for younger people to want to farm. We had the 4-H back in the day. 4-H has got to be cool again. You know what I mean? And so this has got to be something that we really turn our attention to, because the last thing we want to do is find ourselves in a situation a few years down the road that we're importing our food from all over the world. We can't produce what we need to eat. And then we're really going to be in a quandary if that happens.
Well, this is a common sense question. I think any regular folks out there would probably be asking you right now. And that's, why are we taking food from countries who hate us? Is it not common sense an additive could be put in there just to disrupt the country?
Of course it could be. Yes, exactly. That's why I said earlier that food production is a matter of national security. We've got to be able to feed ourselves. And, if we're importing stuff from China and Indonesia, they cut those shipments off in a heartbeat. And then do you trust what you've even gotten with radioactive shrimp, for example? And once the problem is, if they were able to kill the shrimping industry in eastern North Carolina, these coastal counties, once that industry is killed, it's not coming back. Once you kill a farm, it's hard for it to come back. Once you have 100 acres of farmland that is, sold out to developers for, a neighborhood with 4 or 5 cul-de-sacs, that farmland is never coming back. We have to understand that it's an important natural resource that's got to be protected for many reasons. And it's something that we've not been focused on enough. It's interesting. We talk about regulations, how regulations hurt small business. Regulations kill small farms. There's an EPA regulation. WUSA means Waters of the USA. And for example, it was passed by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to save these stupid fish or tadpoles or whatever they are. And it's gotten so ridiculous that farmers can't even move ditches on their land without violating these federal regulations. And so we're going to have, one of the things we're going to have to do is go to war against these regulations that are hurting small farms and small business. And that's one of the things I'm really going to be focused on in the Senate, because, as I said, my granddaddy was a small farmer, and I grew up working on farms, and I understand the importance of food production. And so we got to get the situation turned around so that we're making farming great again. That's got to happen.
No, it's got to. I saw something where President Trump is putting something in force, making farming great again. And so he's talking about equipment, and I totally get it. Okay, so and it's where, you remember my granddad used to tinker with his tractor all the time. He had one of those
John Deere. Yeah, we had John Deere, the green and yellow John Deere, So
yeah, well, he had a Cub, and he kept that. And he had another tractor too, but he really loved his Cub. And he said, "I like this one better than the other one." It was the type you put this handle in it, and you would crank it. We would ride on the back of the tractor with him when he would, plow his garden and that kind of thing. It was a lot of fun for us, but it was something he could tinker with, parts made in the United States, all those things. So if something happened to it, he would just go to the store and, order a part or whatever he needed to do and repair it himself.
Right.
And now it's regulated so much, tiny little hands would be the only hands that would be able to get into the motor part of a tractor these days. So that's what Trump's trying to do. So more things are done in-house in America, in the United States.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's what we got to get back to, really. So, but it's a good point you raised. And I think that what we need to also do is to remove ownership from these, especially BRICS nations that are owning large swaths of farmland in the United States. I'd start with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And I think we need to take ownership away from any foreign entity from those countries that are owning land in the United States, and sell that land back to American farmers at discounted prices to put American farmland back into American hands. And it is a dangerous thing, really, when you're having these. You look at China and Russia and India, but especially China, are owning farmland near Fort Bragg, an American military bases. And that just makes no common sense in the world. And so we got to be a lot more protective of the agriculture industry in the United States to make sure it survives.
Let's talk quality control with manufacturing companies here in the United States. We have this, it's an overmassive reach out of recalls. I mean, like your peanut butter. Okay, so I've got the peanut butter in my shelf. I bought it 3 months ago, and it's still in there. But then all of a sudden, I get a recall. E. coli or something in it. Shouldn't that have been detected way before it got on the shelf, before we bought it in the grocery store?
Sure should have. You would think an E. coli of all things to be testing for that. You have to wonder what happened there. And what do they want you to do? Mail it back? They mail you another jar?
None of that makes sense either. Okay, so because I used to be a headhunter, okay, and what I mean by that, I used to own a Snelling franchise, and I had a lot of fun with that. I've loved everything I've ever done. It's always been fun. This is back in the 1980s, and I'm just telling you, the people who were looking for quality control folks in their manufacturing companies, I mean, they had to be perfect. I mean, these people had to really know their stuff. So if we let the gap down, and I'm saying this because a lot of times people will get a job, not because they're the most skilled person for the job, but because they're a particular color, because they're not from here, but there's many silly reasons why the top person doesn't get the job necessarily every single time. Do you feel like that could be the possibilities of why things aren't run as efficiently as they should be.
I think that we've gone through a period of Democrat forced DEI from the top, and it's caused a lot of problems in management, a lot of problems in morale within the workplaces, a lot of problems in efficiency. And yeah, I think that, you have to kind of look at it on a case-by-case basis, but the illegal and unconstitutional infusion of DEI into the American workplace has been a real detriment to quality and production, because you're putting people into positions not because of their qualifications, because they match some, letter on an acronym. And so, I think we're hopefully turning the page on that some. As long as the Democrats are out of office, we'll continue to turn the page on it. If they get back in, they're going to try to bring it back. But at least we're identifying the problem. And I think you got a point.
Well, as a business owner, I want the best possible person for any position I may have open. I want the best. And I don't really care if they're confused about their sex. I don't care if they're gay. I don't care if they're lesbian. I don't care. I want the best person for the job. I just don't want it shoved down my throat as a business owner.
Right. Correct. Right. That's exactly right. We don't want stuff shoved down our throats, whether it's a political candidate somebody's trying to shove down our throat, or some sort of lifestyle philosophy. Do what you want to do. Just don't make me eat the meat that you're serving, because I don't want it. I want to order what I want to order, and that's human nature. And it's there's been a big backlash against all that now. President's ended this Pride Month junk for the military, and we're now focusing on military readiness again, and so we're turning in the right direction, Donna. But unfortunately, there's too much of that philosophy that's still out there. It needs to be eradicated. It needs to be eradicated in the school system. You see, they've used the school system to try to, as a kind of a culture, a yeast culture. We used to have those little yeast cultures we did in biology to try to let this stuff fester and grow. And we've got to attack it at the educational level also, just to know that stuff is not only is it illegal, but it breeds mediocrity, because you're promoting people based on something other than qualifications.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, you're out on the road and you hear regular folks like me talking. What are they talking about? What kind of questions are they asking you?
Well, healthcare cost of living, I'm hearing a lot. I was in at a Christmas party in Davie County, North Carolina, the Republican GOP party up there, and a gentleman comes up to me. I'm 55 years old. I'm having to pay over $3,000 a month with these premiums, these Obamacare premiums. What can be done? You're hearing that a lot. It's just choking people, and not just the cost, but the inefficiency in the delivery of healthcare services. We're hearing that too. So that is a big thing that we're hearing. We're also hearing folks say that they are supportive of the president's attempts to get these, criminal aliens out of the country. And that's while the Democrats are, crying crocodile tears over that. Nonetheless, folks I'm talking to are very, very supportive of that. DEI is something that people hate. People understand that. And I'll tell you the other thing that is really resonating on the campaign trail for us, and that's both the national debt and medical freedom. And both of those issues, believe it or not, really are lighting it up with the Republican audiences that we're talking about. And people, it's been too recent since we had this COVID scam. And when I say scam, I'm talking about the whole deal of trying to make us think the mask worked or that vaccines worked, or that your job isn't essential, therefore you got to stay home, or you got to take this into your body, or you're going to lose your job. People are still furious about that sort of thing. So medical freedom and the national debt and the cost of health care are three things that really people have on their minds, and I think that's going to continue to be the case.
Could there be some type of, classes or something for people? I'm talking about how to save money. People don't know how to save money anymore. Workshops, something, at least get it into the school system where you can teach that if I make extra house payments, that I can shave a lot of interest off of my house, my property. I mean, something needs to be done about teaching less of the nonsense, but more about practicality, things that we use in an everyday life. I mean, it's surprising. I told the story about my son and daughter-in-law. I mean, Like, this is 30-year mortgage almost freaked me out when they did that, but I didn't say anything. I let them do it. And I mean, I'm not going to stop them. But they had a goal set they didn't tell me about. They had a goal set to have this house paid off in 10 years before their 10th wedding anniversary, and they did it. But they applied every dime they could to the house payment. Saved over $100,000 just in interest.
Yeah, it's very, very wise. Very wise. And, but that's the type of thing that should be taught in schools. And the way it's going to have to happen is, first of all, somebody's going to design that curriculum. And then it's going to have to be rolled out to local school districts. Mm-hmm. I don't anticipate it'll be miraculous if that gets pushed from the top down. Until we get rid of the Department of Education, finally, it's going to be hard for that to happen. But those curriculums can be written, and they need to be pushed. They need to be pitched to school boards in conservative areas like Union County, North Carolina, and other areas. And they need to be adopted, probably, I would say, at least by the 10th grade, so that, 10th, 11th, 12th, you're getting ready to graduate from high school. These concepts and skills ought to be taught by the time the kid graduates from high school. That way, if the kid decides to go to a trade school or go directly to work or go to a community college or even go to, Clemson right there in your backyard or University of South Carolina down the road, that they will at least have understood basic principles of savings. And I think it needs to happen. I think we need to recruit somebody to write the curriculum, and then we need to start selling it at the local level of these school boards, and school boards need to require that it be taught locally, and I think it'll spread across the country. Maybe even it'll become something that state boards of education will consider.
I think it would be very wise. Just a few minutes left in this segment. Okay, once elected, what would be the first 3 things you would like to put in place?
First thing I want to do is to put in a Deep State Reduction Act, which would require a 2/3 reduction in all federal employees, eliminated over 10 years, and a 2/3 elimination of all federal agencies, and all that money to be applied to the national debt. Because if we lose the dollar, we've lost everything, and we're on a fast track right now of losing the dollar. We've slowed the rate of spending under Trump, but we're still, the debt, it's expanding, Donna, exploding at $37,000 a second. Since I've been on air with you, the debt has increased over $100 million already. So that's got to happen. Number 2, I want to see some radical legislation for medical freedom. I want to see propose and push vaccination and mask protection act so that never again can either the federal government or any state government or any employer force us to accept anything in our bodies without legal ramification against those people. In other words, we should be federally protected from this ever happening again. And the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum is now talking about microchip insertion. That's where they're going to go next. The Vaccination Protection Act will protect against that. That's the second thing. Third thing, I want to rein in these federal judges. I want to propose what I call a Judicial Separation of Powers Act that will remind federal judges that their power is limited and will take away all the power that they think they have, which they don't, but it will take away explicitly all power these federal judges have over the issue of immigration naturalization and over issues of the U.S. military. So, Deep State Reduction Act, Vax and Mass Protection Act, Judicial Separation of Powers Act, to take care to attack the national debt, to ensure medical freedom, to start reining in federal judges. It goes from there. There are a lot of other things as well, but those are the first 3 that I'll be focusing on.
Absolutely. Something we're going to have to call it a day. Thank you so much for being on the show with me. How can folks get in contact with you if they would like to volunteer or give to the campaign?
Thanks, Donna. We'll go to brownfornc.com, brownfornc.com. You can click a donate button, click that first, donate as much as you can. And there's a contact us button there. Click that as well. And we would love to have everybody on board for the campaign. We need volunteers. We need social media coordinators to help us get the message out via social media. We're fighting a machine. We're fighting an establishment machine. We're going to beat them at the grassroots, but we need everyone involved and all hands on deck in order to do that. Please go to brownfornc.com and donate and contact us, and let's get together and show that we, the people, are still in control of our government.
Absolutely. We the people. Thank you again, Donna.